Everything you've heard about Captain Ibrahim Traore barely scratches the surface. To the world, he's a mystery in military fatigues, Africa's youngest coup leader, a sudden blip on the global radar. But that's just the cover story. Behind the headlines, behind the uniform, lies something far more complex and far more dangerous. This is not just a tale of power seized in the dead of night. It's the story of a quiet soldier forged in fire, who walked through bullets, betrayal, and buried history to become the face of a rebellion no one saw coming. In this video, we peel back the layers the media won't. We go beyond the press conferences and the propaganda to reveal how one man from a dusty corner of Burkina Faso defied empires, rewrote the rules, and ignited a fire across West Africa. If you think this is just another military strongman, think again, because this is the story of Captain Ibrahim Traore, the soldier who was never supposed to lead and who might just be shaping the future of a continent. Captain Ibrahim Traore didn't grow up with silver spoons or political privilege. His story began in the modest town of Bondakwi, nestled in the Muhaun province of western Burkina Faso. Born in 1988, just a year after the assassination of the revolutionary Thomas Sankara, Traore's childhood was shaped by echoes of a fallen dream and the shadows of imperial legacy. He was known by classmates for his discipline, quiet intelligence, and an early sense of justice that set him apart. Raised in a humble Muslim family, Traore's worldview was grounded in community, hard work, and the struggles of ordinary Burkinabe citizens. His academic journey led him to the University of Ouagadougou, where he studied geology, an ironic choice for a man who would later shake political bedrock. But the real turning point came when he joined the military, seeking not just a job, but a mission. Traore enrolled at the Georges Namono Military Academy, where he was introduced to not only warfare, but revolutionary ideology, lessons that resonated deeply with the legacy of Sankara. Early deployments took him to some of the most volatile regions in the country, where he witnessed firsthand the government's failure to protect civilians from jihadist violence. These experiences hardened his resolve, planting seeds of dissent that would later grow into full-blown rebellion. By the time he became a captain in an elite anti-terrorism unit, Traore had developed a reputation for bravery, sharp strategy, and an unwavering loyalty, not to politicians, but to the people. He built trust among his men by leading from the front, earning admiration rarely seen in the deeply hierarchical military. Quietly, he began forming connections with like-minded officers, those disillusioned by corruption, foreign dependency, and military incompetence. The young geologist-turned-soldier was becoming something far more dangerous, a man with both conviction and command. While other officers chased rank and favor, Traore studied history, insurgency, and the anatomy of past revolutions. Beneath the uniform was a thinker and a planner. What the world would one day witness as a surprise coup was, in truth, the slow ignition of a revolutionary mind. And it all started with a boy from Bondakwi who believed his country deserved better. By the early 2020s, Burkina Faso was spiraling. What was once a quiet West African nation known for its cultural resilience and revolutionary past had become a battlefield for survival. Waves of Islamist insurgencies, first spilling over from Mali, tore into the northern and eastern regions, burning villages, killing civilians, and displacing over 2 million people. Armed groups with affiliations to Al-Qaeda and ISIS seized territory with ease, exploiting weak borders and weaker leadership. Schools were shut down, roads became death traps, and entire communities vanished under the smoke of jihadist raids. Amidst this chaos, trust in the central government evaporated. President Roch Kabore, once seen as a beacon of democracy, now stood accused of indifference and incompetence. His army, under-equipped and demoralized, was no match for the nimble insurgents who used motorcycles and fear as their weapons. The people cried for help, but help never came. The crisis wasn't just military, it was existential. In marketplaces and mosques, in cafes and classrooms, Burkinabe citizens whisper about a government that had lost touch and a military leadership too entangled in politics to act. Meanwhile, France, the former colonial power, maintained a military presence in a region under Operation Barkhane, claiming to assist in the anti-terror fight. But for many Burkinabe, French troops symbolized something else: dependency, failed strategy, and a neo-colonial grip that still clenched their nation. Discontent deepened into anger. Demonstrations erupted in Ouagadougou, not just against jihadist violence, but against government paralysis and foreign influence. Civilians began waving Russian flags in protests, not out of affection for Moscow, but as a symbol of defiance against France. Into this maelstrom of fear and fury, a quiet coalition of officers began to emerge. Young, disciplined, and deeply frustrated. Captain Ibrahim Traore was among them. Traore saw what others ignored, that Burkina Faso wasn't just losing battles. It was losing hope. His own anti-jihadist missions exposed him to futility of the current strategy. Soldiers fought bravely but lacked food, bullets, and a clear chain of command. He watched friends die and civilians beg for protection that never arrived. The government's response? Speeches, international summits, hollow promises. For Traore, this was a final betrayal. A nation once inspired by Sankara's defiant stand against imperialism had become a client state, broken, dependent, and under siege. The crisis, then, was not just a test of policy. It was a crucible for radical change. And as the fires of insurgency spread, so too did the whispers of rebellion within the barracks. Traore listened, observed, and waited, not for orders, but for the perfect moment to act. Before the world knew his name, Captain Ibrahim Traore was just another officer in Burkina Faso's army, dutiful, soft-spoken, and fiercely intelligent. Born in 1988 in Bondakwi, a modest town in the west of the country, Traore was shaped by the shadows of Burkina Faso's turbulent political past. The revolutionary legacy of Thomas Sankara loomed large, an icon who preached self-reliance, Pan-Africanism, and integrity before being assassinated in 1987. For many in Traore's generation, Sankara wasn't just history. He was unfinished business. Traore carried that legacy in silence, never grandstanding, but always watching. After studying geology at the University of Ouagadougou, he joined the military, not out of ambition but conviction. He believed the army was still the one institution where a citizen could serve the nation with honor. Deployed to the front lines of the jihadist crisis, Traore earned the respect of fellow soldiers not through rank, but through courage. He was the kind of officer who ate with the men, shared their rations, and stood watch beside them in hostile terrain. His comrades nicknamed him Le Capitaine du Peuple, the captain of the people. But behind his calm demeanor was a mind that analyzed every failure and every betrayal by the leadership above. When President Roch Kabore was overthrown in January 2022 by Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, many thought change had finally come. But Traore soon realized the coup had only rearranged the same old chessboard. Damiba, a general with French military ties, focused more on international optics than internal reform. Corruption persisted. Troops still lacked ammunition. Attacks worsened. Disillusionment turned to outrage. Traore began to quietly build alliances within the military's younger ranks. Men and women who had grown tired of orders that led nowhere and comrades buried for nothing. He didn't offer them promises. He offered them a plan. A real one. One that involved removing Damiba, rejecting foreign interference, and redirecting the nation's fight inward toward reclaiming sovereignty. By September 2022, Traore and his allies moved swiftly. In a bold, bloodless coup, they seized power in the capital, ousted Damiba, and declared the end of false leadership. Traore, just 34 years old, became the head of state, the youngest in the world. But unlike other coup leaders, he didn't surround himself with cronies or seek glory. His speech to the nation was clear and stark. We are fighting for our survival. In that moment, Traore transformed from officer to oracle, from soldier to symbol. While international observers questioned his legitimacy, many Burkinabe citizens celebrated him. His image, with piercing eyes and a red beret, became iconic overnight. Some saw Sankara in him. Others saw a spark of hope in a sea of despair. But for Traore, the coup was not the endgame. It was just the opening move in a much larger war. For justice, for security, for dignity. He knew the empires he was defying weren't just military. They were economic, ideological, and historical. And to win, he would need more than guns. He would need a nation willing to believe again. Captain Ibrahim Traore did not simply inherit a nation in chaos. He inherited a battlefield laced with invisible wires, tripwires of neocolonialism, foreign influence, and corporate greed. Burkina Faso, like many African nations, was fighting not just terrorists with guns, but systems that had long siphoned its resources and dictated its politics from afar. Traore knew that true independence required more than flags and anthems. It demanded the courage to challenge the powers that once drew Africa's borders with rulers in hand. In speeches and policies, he began to name the unspoken. Foreign military bases that served foreign interests, multinational corporations profiting off Burkina gold, and so-called allies who offered aid with strings attached. One of his boldest moves came just months into his leadership. Traore ordered the withdrawal of French military forces stationed in the country, ending Operation Sabre, a controversial mission criticized for its ineffectiveness and paternalism. Many cheered this decision as a reclaiming of national dignity. For decades, France's shadow had loomed over West Africa, militarily, economically, and politically. By evicting French troops, Traore was making it clear Burkina Faso would no longer be a client state. He then turned toward building new alliances, strengthening ties with neighboring Mali and Guinea, both also led by military governments resisting French influence. Together, they began to form a bloc of defiant states, advocating for a sovereign West Africa, free from the neo-colonial grip of the West. At home, Traore cracked down on corruption, redirected gold revenues to fund the military, and called on citizens to volunteer in the war against jihadism. His leadership wasn't polished. It was raw, direct, and often unfiltered, but it struck a nerve. Thousands answered the call, joining local militias to defend their villages. In a land scarred by displacement and violence, hope flickered where it hadn't in years. Traore also pushed for educational reform and agricultural self-reliance, pillars of Sankara's vision, resurrected in a new age. Western media painted him with suspicion, sometimes calling him anti-democratic or a populist strongman. But within Burkina Faso and part of Africa, he was becoming something rarer, a leader who dared to speak the truth, however uncomfortable. International pressure mounted. Aid was withheld. Sanctions loomed. But Traore didn't flinch. Our liberation will not come from Paris or Washington, he declared. It will come from Ouagadougou, from us. He refused to attend high-profile international summits where African leaders were often treated as clients or spectators. Instead, he sent a message. Burkina Faso would not kneel. It would rise, even if it rose alone, in defying the empires, both old and new. Captain Ibrahim Traore was staking his legacy on a dangerous gamble. He wasn't just fighting jihadists. He was fighting an entire global order built on exploitation. And though the path ahead was fraught with risk, he walked it with the certainty of someone who knew that fear, not failure, was a true enemy of liberation. At just 34 years old, Captain Ibrahim Traore became the youngest head of state in the world, a title that drew both admiration and alarm. To many outside observers, he was a political anomaly, a soldier with little diplomatic experience now sitting atop one of the most volatile regions on earth. But within Burkina Faso, Traore's youth became his greatest symbol. In a nation where the average age is under 20, he embodied a generational uprising, a break from the old guard who had ruled with foreign scripts and colonial echoes. He wasn't a polished bureaucrat or seasoned politician. He was a field commander, a chemist turned revolutionary who carried the dust of the front lines on his boots. But with the presidency came impossible pressure. Traore didn't inherit a nation at peace. He inherited a crisis. Nearly half of Burkina Faso's territory was under threat from jihadist groups. Entire communities had been displaced. Schools, hospitals, and farms lay abandoned. Civilian trust in institutions had all but evaporated. And as the new captain took the helm, all eyes turned toward him, not with blind hope, but with a hard question. Could this young revolutionary deliver where seasoned leaders had failed? Rather than retreat into ceremonial leadership, Traore doubled down. He donned fatigues and visited soldiers on the front lines, often appearing without body armor, standing side by side with exhausted troops. These images, raw and unscripted, spread across the nation, igniting a rare spark of morale. His presence was not symbolic. He spoke directly with locals, organized regional defense committees, and began arming community-based fighters. But this strategy also came with criticism. Human rights organizations warned of the risks in arming untrained civilians. Accusations of abuses followed. The international press began casting him as a warlord in uniform rather than a reformer with vision. Domestically, the stakes were just as high. Traore's promise to nationalize resources and root out corruption put him at odds with elites and foreign investors alike. Gold, Burkina Faso's most lucrative export, had long been mined by multinationals with little benefit to locals. Under Traore, new policies aimed to channel gold revenues back into the public sector, particularly to fund schools, military salaries, and healthcare in neglected rural areas. But challenging entrenched interests would not go uncontested. There were whispers of internal dissent. Reports of coup plots circulated. Yet Traore maintained a hard stance. "We are not here to manage the crisis," he said. "We are here to end it." Outside Burkina Faso, Western governments remained wary. The French withdrawal strained long-standing alliances, and Traore's growing ties with other non-Western nations raised eyebrows. Speculation mounted about Russian involvement, particularly through the presence of Wagner-linked operatives in the region. Traore denied surrendering national sovereignty, asserting that Burkina Faso would partner with any nation that respected its independence. It was a high-wire act, navigating between foreign powers while fending off insurgents and maintaining domestic stability. Few leaders, let alone one so young, had faced such a baptism by fire. Still, Traore's message remained consistent. The destiny of Burkina Faso must be written by Burkinabes. He stood before thousands of young people at rallies, urging them not just to fight, but to rebuild, to believe, and to lead. He refused to delay elections indefinitely, stating that democracy would return, but only when security was restored and sovereignty guaranteed. For now, he would carry the burden. "We have no choice," he declared. "The future is ours, or it is nothing at all." In many ways, Traore's presidency is still being written, etched in the muddy roads of villages once overrun by violence, and in the cautious optimism of a generation daring to believe in something different. Whether history will remember him as a liberator, a revolutionary, or a controversial firebrand remains uncertain. But what is clear is that, under fire and against the odds, Captain Ibrahim Traore did not flinch. Captain Ibrahim Traore's rise is more than a national story. It is a continental signal, a marker of a deeper shift unfolding across Africa. His ascent, forged in resistance and defiance, stands as a rebuke to decades of foreign interference, post-colonial inertia, and the recycled rule of aging elites. In his face, millions of young Africans see not just a soldier, but a mirror. A generation tired of waiting for change now watches a peer take charge, not through ballot, but through boldness and rebellion. Whether seen as a liberator or a usurper, Traore has injected a raw urgency into the African political narrative. Unlike the traditional strongman archetype, Traore blends grassroots appeal with radical pragmatism. He speaks not in slogans, but with the urgency of someone who knows villages are burning and futures are fading. His focus on sovereignty, economic, military, and cultural, echoes the philosophies of past African revolutionaries like Thomas Sankara and Patrice Lumumba. But Traore is not just resurrecting the past. He is rewriting it in real time, confronting modern threats like terrorism, resource exploitation, and global disinformation. In doing so, he's challenging not just Western power structures, but also African complacency. His leadership is already influencing the region. Neighboring countries battling similar jihadist insurgencies are watching closely. Mali, Niger, and Guinea, nations also led by military juntas, have begun forming alliances, distancing themselves from former colonial powers and leaning into a Pan-Africanist revival. These states are rejecting what they call imperial puppeteering and, instead, forging new military and economic partnerships, often with non-traditional allies like Russia, Turkey, and China. It's a geopolitical realignment with global consequences, and Traore is emerging as one of its central figures. Yet this bold posture comes with undeniable risks. Critics argue that the erosion of democratic norms, suppression of dissent, and militarization of governance could lead to long-term instability. Skeptics warn that romanticizing soldiers as saviors often ends in disappointment, or worse, dictatorship. Others question whether Traore's government can sustain public support without delivering tangible improvements in security, education, and infrastructure, the revolution's fire burns bright. But without fuel, results, reforms, reconciliation, it risks turning to smoke. Still, Traore's defiance resonates. In a world where Africa is often spoken for rather than listened to, his voice is uncompromising. "We are not here to please the powerful," he has said. "We are here to protect our people." These words, raw and uncompromising, are not just rhetoric. They are a worldview. In refusing to be a client of foreign empires, Traore is staking claim for a new kind of African leadership, rooted in dignity, independence, and responsibility. Already, monuments, murals, and songs have emerged in his honor. To some, he is the reincarnation of Sankara. To others, he is a question mark with Kalashnikov. Too young, too daring, too uncertain. But one thing is clear. Ibrahim Traore has forced the world to pay attention. Whether he becomes a transformative leader or a cautionary tale depends not only on his decisions, but on the will of the people he claims to serve. The story of Captain Ibrahim Traore is still unfolding, but whatever its ending, it will be studied, debated, and remembered as a moment when the old order trembled and a new voice rose from the Sahel with the audacity to say, "We will decide our future." And for a continent long defined by others, that alone is revolutionary.